Tonight on Business PNG, we take a look at the country's second largest city, Lae, the capital of Morobe province, PNG's economic northeast corridor, centrally located, allowing access to the Highlands and Madang Highway, several mining sites and port facilities, making it a natural industrial hub with considerable activity in the sectors of manufacturing, trading, agribusiness, fisheries and many more, allowing for over 60 to 70% of all PNG's trade to pass through, including 90% of coffee exports. Despite Lae's economic stance, the cost of doing business is still subject to the kind of infrastructure challenges that are endemic in PNG. Congestion in the country's busiest port leads to continued freight delays, while the reduced state of urban roads have given way to the nickname Pothole City. Lae, like Port Moresby, suffers from security issues, with its ease of access making it an obvious destination for travelers from the highlands. However, not all is rain and gloom for Lae. Badly needed investment is occurring in power generation, with internet connectivity greatly improved as a result of Lae connecting to the fiber optic network connecting PNG to the World Wide Web via Madang. And the biggest infrastructure project of all, the expansion of Lae's port. Steady improvements are being made to the city's roads, and a new highway to Nadzab Airport is currently under construction.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for this edition of the Oxford Business Group Corner. This is a special edition for us tonight because we're broadcasting from Lae, the capital of Morobe province. This will be the first of a series of events that we'll be organizing around the country in some of the most important development corridors. Obviously, Lae is the country's industrial hub, and we think that this should be our first stop. With me tonight, I have some very interesting guests that I would like to introduce you shortly. First of all, I'd like to say that 2015 has been a tough year for Papua New Guinea. We all know about that. It's been described as a perfect storm in the sense that the country has experienced a really dramatic drought, and unfortunately, the international market commodities have been down. So we think that the gentlemen that are here with me tonight might have some answers for these specific problems. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my left, Gerard O'Brien is the General Manager of Laga Industries. I have Robert Nilkare, the Country Managers of New Britain Palm Oil. I have Michael Kingston, the CEO of KK Kingston, and I have Wayne Adams, the General Manager of Majestic Seafood. And last but not least, Mike Quinn is the Managing Director of Professional Real Estate. So I have an interesting group of people. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let's start from what I was saying at the beginning. We call this event Response to a Downturn. So should we say economic downturn is more of a challenge or an opportunity for any country around the world, especially for Papua New Guinea? I would like to start perhaps with Mike Quinn, just out of the fact that you have the longest experience in Papua New Guinea, 40 years on the ground. I'm sure you have seen a lot of those booms and busts. So is more a challenge or more an opportunity?
Well, I think they're both actually. The two go hand in hand. The challenge is surviving the downturn. The challenge is sorting out your business so that you can get through it. The opportunities there come from leaner operations, less fat in your systems, that you become more profitable, hopefully more profitable, and operate in a much better manner. So it's neither one nor the other, it's a combination of the both, and you've got to use both of those circumstances to your advantage, I think.
And I think one of the subjects that we touched upon, and it's something that everybody that operates in Papua New Guinea agrees on, that the cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea is very, very high, higher than many other countries in the region. So I'd like to ask a question to Gerard, that also himself has been in Papua New Guinea relatively a short amount of time. Gerard, you have a long experience in Australia before coming to Papua New Guinea when it comes to manufacturing. What sort of situation you found on the ground when you arrived here, and how did you compare it to Australia?
To me, you know, there's enormous challenges to do business in this country. You know, ranging from the short-term crisis of trying to get foreign exchange, but I think the longer term, you know, the longer term here, everybody recognises is the potential is enormous, particularly in the food industry. But the challenge, like infrastructure, you know, just being able to get your goods up the highway to the highlands is enormous. And to me, when you're in a crisis, this is the time to invest. You know, the governments should be looking, you know, at the long-term future and investing in infrastructure that's going to help reduce the cost of doing business so we can compete.
Robert, perhaps of everybody sitting in this room, you're the one that faces this problem the most because you're operating in remote area. And one thing that we have noticed in Papua New Guinea that many times corporations tend to replace governments. Now, is this sustainable on the long run? And what sort of incentive the government should actually provide to company like yours that provides job to as much as 20,000, 25,000 people in Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier to you, Marco, that Papua New Guinea is a country of do-it-yourself. We operate in some isolated areas. We maintain about 3,000 kilometres of government roads system, and as best as possible, we try to do that under the tax credit program. But even with doing tax credit on roads and bridges and public infrastructure such as schools and health centres and other things, it's not as easy as it sounds because just the paperwork alone, it's quite tedious and it does take time. But we're caught in, I mean, our group is caught in a situation where we have no choice. If we don't fix that bridge or if we don't fix that culvert, we can't move the fruit and then we can't process the fruit, we can't move the oil to the port. And we have to ensure that you know, all the bridges going to the port and from the field into the mill are all working. To the best of our ability, we try to work with the government, you know, the local Department of Works and the local members and so on and so forth. But I mean, quite often you'll find that they themselves have their hands tied because they just don't have the funds available to carry these things out.
I think Michael wants to add something to that argument.
My observation has been that the reason the government doesn't invest in infrastructure as much as we would like and doesn't perform the maintenance as much as we would like is because of fiscal reasons. It's no secret the government has a fiscal crisis right now. Now, to me, there are two very simple things that the government could and should do in order to resolve this fiscal crisis. And broadly speaking, one is to broaden the tax base, and the second thing is to review the tariffs. Now, I'll touch on tariffs first because it's a pet topic of mine. It seems completely wrong to me that here we are, we have one of the biggest palm oil industries in the world, and yet most of the oil consumed in Papua New Guinea is imported. Most of the oil in Papua New Guinea is imported. That's wrong. Why should we be taking tariffs off of imported oil and making it hard to sell our own products? Let's put some tariffs on this imported oil. It's going to generate more jobs for Papua New Guineans. It's going to generate income for the government. And that's true for many things. The second thing is broadening the tax base. And again, it's no secret that there are a very small number of companies that pay most of the tax in Papua New Guinea. There are a very large number of small and medium-sized enterprises that pay no tax whatsoever. Compliance is a major issue in Papua New Guinea. And if the government wishes to resolve its fiscal issues and to have the cash available to invest in this infrastructure, then it needs to look long and hard at compliance issues and make sure that every business in PNG pays its fair share.
Join us after the break for a first-hand look into Lae's economy. Welcome back. Oxford Business Group's Editorial Manager Marco Venditti had the opportunity to facilitate a panel discussion in Lae City, with the topic of dialogue being the Morobean economy. Making up the panelists were Lae's big league economy players, with representatives from KK Kingston, New Britain Palm Oil, the Professionals Real Estate and other key participants.
Now, there is something that Michael told me before that I think it's interesting. You were saying we don't have a problem of law and order. We have a problem of unemployment. I think that's an interesting point. So maybe you want to stress upon that.
Clearly, we do have a problem with all of the symptoms of law and order, whether it's robberies, break and entries, and so on. We have all those symptoms. But to me, those are symptoms of the fact that the vast majority of young people between the ages of 16 and 30 don't have jobs. They have no source of income. They have no productive output for their energies. And in that situation, what is a young man going to do? He's going to resort to crime. And most of the crime that we experience in Lae is acquisitive crime. It's about getting something. So I would put it to anyone who cares to listen that one of the great challenges facing Papua New Guinea is creating enough jobs for our people. Okay, it's hard to get employment statistics, but you know, if we were ever to achieve something like 90% employment in Lae, we would no longer have a law and order problem.
That's a very good point, and Robert, you can testify to that because you're operating in remote areas where basically you're the only source of employment, really. And would you say that you could see that, you know, when there is unemployment, the crime inevitably goes down? Is it true? Do you have that direct correlation?
That's why we actively go out to ensure that our smallholders, especially the village oil palm growers, the leaseholders, whoever we're dealing with, we actively ensure that as long as their plot is taken care of, you know, in terms of, and we've got a program there where we supply the fertilizer and basically manage the cultivation of their. If we don't do that, then there'll be a breakdown in society, the villages, and then, you know, if the people don't have anything to do, especially the young people in the villages, then they will, you know, they'll just resort to crime. I mean, the first thing they'll do is they'll just go straight after the company assets. You know, I mean, and so we have to actively engage with the community, and it's not just us. I mean, I guess it's you know, the sector, the renewable sector. I mean, the opportunity for employment is the industry that we're in, whether it's in fishing or agriculture. It's all, I mean, it's all there. We just have to. I mean, the government has to. I mean, it just sort of comes back to the government's management of the country again. I mean, it comes back to Michael's point about the protection tariffs. You know, why are we importing all these cheap things that we could produce here locally?
One industry that is competitive, it is the canning industry. So perhaps, Wayne, you want to say something about that? Yes, keep up on that.
What I was going to say on that one is, we're talking about increasing jobs. One of the things that I don't see being looked at is the actual education process. We are educating a lot of people that will be educated unemployed people because we're not educating them to the jobs that are available. So I think some work needs to be done. We spoke earlier as a group about technical jobs. You can put a job in the paper for an accountant and you can get 20 people. You can put a job in the paper for a refrigeration engineer, a mechanic, somebody skilled, and you'll be lucky if you get 1 or 2 certified, competent people. And if we want to deal with the education crisis to reduce the crime, we need to be looking in the right avenues. Like, I'm working in a startup industry, basically. We did start in 2013. We do have 1,200 employees, and we're growing quickly. And there are other capacities doing the same thing. There's other factories going to start up in the fishing industry in the next 2 years. If we don't train the right people, if we don't have the right education processes, we will struggle. Unitech have only this year added a fish processing component to their Unitech processing, food processing course. They don't have a post-harvest course, and UFC are in a place that we can't get people to get training done. So if we're going to look at education, we need the education institutes in the right places, but also align people that are coming out of secondary school to the jobs available. We can't have a whole lot of IT professionals, accountants, going to his insular POM and working inside the egg. If we want to lower the employment, increase employment and lower the amount of what's going on.
There's been a number of this company trickling into the system, and which they provide very little of that, very little of transfer of knowledge, very little training, very little transfer of capacity. And even here in Lae, we've seen a lot of that. So I'm looking at you, Mike, because you've seen a lot of cycles in the past, and this is fairly new to Papua New Guinea and to Morobe and Lae specifically. Do you think this is an issue, this is a problem, as opposed to international investors from Australia? New Zealand has been traditionally the international partners for Papua New Guinea that had a different approach, and also in relation to education and training.
On the training side of it, it's very important to have quality training. There is a number of initiatives around Lae, for example, vocational centres, they call them TVET, and they're good in as much as they're giving people basic training in various trade skills and things like that, but we aren't able to take those people to the higher level. And I can recall, for example, Bougainville Copper, which used to be here many, many years ago. The quality of the tradesmen that came out of the training programs that Bougainville Copper, for example, had were exceptional. They were first world standard trained people. We don't have them here anymore. We have people that come through the vocational centres and they're doing a reasonable job, but they're not taking the training to the level that we need. So we have to look offshore to get the skills that we need to fix that. And this is where some of the larger corporations and the Ramush, Agri Industries and those sort of organisations that have have a significant size about them can do in-house training, but we need to have training for people outside of the larger employers so that people can be adequately trained to a first world standard. We don't want to continue to settle for mediocrity. We need to be achieving or aiming for first world. I spent a fair bit of time on the physical planning board here in Lae trying to see things develop. And on that board I kept saying to people, why should we plan for third world standards? We need to be planning and trying to achieve first world standards, and that's across the board. Quality of our infrastructure, the training of our people, across the board. Aim for first world, not aim for mediocrity. And this is where situations like the financial scenario that we're experiencing today makes you have a look very, very critically at who you've got doing the various jobs that you have in your business. And you've got to work out how you can get maximum performance out of those people. A bit more training here, a bit more skill improvement there. But investing in your staff and in your employees, to my mind, is the best way to work out of a whole.
I would like basically to ask each one of you for a sort of a closing statement type of thing. The idea is what we started with, that this could be an opportunity more than a challenge, and the fact that the business community should get together now to brainstorm in a way and to look for the solution in a moment where the country needs it and business needs it, and the general population does need it. So I will start with Gerard just because it's next to me.
Marco, yeah, I definitely see that there's more opportunity than challenge. You know, I think all of us in the private sector want to invest in our businesses because we see the long-term potential in the country. We just need to solve some of these basic problems in terms of infrastructure, in terms of access to foreign exchange. Law and order, education. So, you know, they're all very clear and present dangers to the environment that we work in. But long term, the investment opportunity here is fantastic.
You go ahead. Yeah.
Marco, thank you. I agree with Gerard. I think it's all of the above. All the challenges that we face in the country with law and order, infrastructure. You know, as a group and as a company, I mean, we're fairly optimistic about where we think that things will get better. In fact, we're looking at expanding. We're looking at more land to develop more oil palm around Papua New Guinea. Our shareholders are quite interested and quite keen to invest in Papua New Guinea as opposed to the other parts of the world where they are, which is a positive sign. And we as a company, you know, all these challenges, and I think Mike said it earlier on that you know, these things will come and go, and it's the companies that are just here for the long haul. And you know, certainly, I mean, New Britain Palm Oil Group is one of those companies, and you know, I think things will get better.
Michael.
First of all, we're very optimistic about the future. In my mind, this is a short-term bump in the road. The medium-term and long-term outlook for PNG is very good. But I've got to make one comment on a really important issue that I don't think we've discussed enough, and that's the foreign exchange crisis that's affecting everyone. It's becoming harder and harder for any business to access foreign currency, and this problem is not getting any better, and something has to be done about it. In my opinion, the thing that has to be done is that the kina needs to be refloated. We had a freely floating currency regime in the past, and the government, for reasons that I'm not privy to, made the decision to go back to a managed or a pegged exchange rate. And what that's caused is this massive supply gap between what we demand in terms of US dollars and what's actually supplied. The only way to fix it at this point is to refloat the currency. Now, overnight, that's going to cause a lot of pain. The value of the kina will drop, there's no doubt. And in the short term, there'll be a lot of pain. But in the long term, there'll be a lot more liquidity in the economy. It'll make exports a lot more competitive, whether it's fisheries, agriculture, or anything else. But most importantly, it'll allow business to continue as normal. And right now, it's like trying to run through honey. It's nearly impossible because you just can't get the money to pay your suppliers. So I plead with the government. We have to do something about this foreign exchange crisis.
Michael, I love that you said honey, because I was thinking about mud, but, but there you are. But thank you very much for stressing that point. I think that was very important, and you're right. We should have touched even more on that. Wayne.
Yeah, I follow on from the path 3. I echo all their comments about the potential is here. That we are able to do a lot with the country with what we have now, but the growth potential is there. One of the things that I'll just catch on to Michael is companies like the one I work for, who basically do everything in US dollars and bring a lot of US dollars into the country, don't see any benefit from doing it. We have outstanding GST claims going into the millions of kina we're waiting for all the time, for months and months and months, yet we're one of the companies with some of the others that are bringing US dollars in, trying to help with the shortfall. We do all our buying and selling in US dollars, so you know, it isn't offset by bringing it in by any advantages. If anything, we still have the same disadvantages, or even more disadvantages, of trying to get some of the things back. But if we can sort of work on those, the things we talked about with education, the processes to make that pipeline the same all the way through, the growth potential for something like the seafood industry is exponential. We could go from probably around 7,500 people, 8,000 people now, to probably more than 50,000 people easily in a short term. So something I think we need to look into, and it offsets or it foils that resource industry that's always going to go up and down.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Marco. Our other panellists covered most of the points, I think. I think one thing, though, I would like to see happen as something of importance would be the creation of a, you know, if you go to war, there's a war cabinet or a war council. Effectively, we have a crisis that we need to manage, and it needs to be done, I think, in a council-type environment. I think all of the vested interests and people involved, commercial, private sector, the government, all should be sitting around hatching a plan that everyone can work with and make happen. One of the most important tools in business is money. We need the banks, for example, to be involved in doing their bit, not just sitting in isolation on the side. Private sector can't tighten its belt and move on without funding and the other tools that it needs. And I think if we can have all the vested interests or the organisations that are able to help take us through this problem around a table, not once but regularly, tweaking, tidying up, fixing, improving, so that we can work our way through this as a cohesive group rather than individuals in isolation or organisations in isolation trying to do their bit.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the wisdom. Money is important in business. We can definitely agree on that. So, Mike, thank you very much. Wayne, Michael, Robert, Gerard, thank you very much all for joining us today, and thank you very much for watching this. You're at home, and hope to see you soon for the next edition of the OBG Corner. And good evening and good night.
And that's all from us tonight. For more business news, or if you would like to view this episode again, visit MTV Online at the URL at the bottom of the screen. Or for up-to-the-minute business news and updates, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Business PNG or on Tumblr. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Michelle Bird, and this was Business PNG.